All right. Hello. Hello, everyone. This is Nicholas Hall, founder of Graham's Foundation, and I'm here talking with Laura Gaddis.
Mhm.
Laura's a preemie parent, but has had quite a journey with pregnancy, and we're going to talk about that. And is also the author of a new book that just came out March 4th, 2025, titled Mosaic, and we'll talk a little bit about that also as well. So, Laura, hello, welcome.
Hi,
And
thank you
if
for
you,
having me.
yeah, absolutely. If you wouldn't mind, maybe just introducing yourself to our listeners, and then I think it makes sense to share a bit about your pregnancy journey, including your daughter. But I know you shared there's
Mhm.
more to it than just that. So if you would, please.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I am a writer. I live in Oxford, Ohio, but I teach English at Miami University, and so I'm a writer by nature. So I write a lot about this topic, actually. I've been writing for since 2010 or 2011 about parenting and pregnancy loss and prematurity and all these things. Um, And yeah, so my story, I guess it started in 2010, when we lost our first child at 20 weeks. And we knew about 2 weeks before she was born that there was something wrong with the pregnancy, that she had some sort of anomalies. Nobody could say what it was exactly. They talked about termination, they talked about what we should do, and then she was born prematurely. I kind of had this tendency to go into premature labor, and we don't really know why either. Um, so she was born, she lived for about an hour and a half.
Mm.
And so after that, I started writing because I was actually a clinical psychology person. I have a master's in clinical psych as well. So a little complicated. But at that point, I always liked writing. I always liked language. So I started a blog and I started
Mhm.
writing to other parents. And the connection I got through that was amazing. People I worked
Yeah,
with,
that was like the blog. That was the time of blogs were still. That was
yeah,
sort of like
yeah,
yeah, Reese and Graham were end of 2006, and so I started blogging as well as a way to, just get the feelings out, and also to share with all friends and family so that they could keep up with what was going on as well. So
yeah, it was a great tool. And I don't know how much people still follow blogs because there's so many things on the internet now, but it was amazing. It was, and I think I did it. I actually didn't realize the connections I would make. I was doing it to share with friends and family, but also just to remember because I was afraid I was going to forget all the details because it's such a traumatic time. And it was so it kind of took us off guard, right? Like we didn't know there was not going to be anything wrong, and within 2 weeks we lost the baby. So I was like, I don't want to forget. So I started writing things, but then I just loved hearing from people I knew, people I didn't know, people my husband knew in high school would email me and say, "Hey, thank you for sharing. I have a story that's similar. This is what happened to me." So also being a clinical psychology person, I really liked the connection and the talking it out because I think that's so helpful for grieving and processing. And so, yeah, I just kind of kept writing from there. Then I started writing articles and for places like Scary Mommy and The Mighty. I wrote about mental health. I struggle a lot with anxiety as well. And in those years, I had two more miscarriages. They were early miscarriages, so we don't know what was the problem. But I mean, obviously, by the time I got to my fourth pregnancy, my daughter, who's almost 10, she has the same genetic issue that my first baby had. So obviously, there's something going on that's
yeah.
making this difficult. But my daughter was born at 32 weeks, spent 5 weeks in the NICU. We started the therapies and stuff right away for her condition. And yeah, now she's almost 10.
So they identified, I guess, at that 18-week kind of period that
Yeah.
similar. And what, so I'm curious, there was a conversation with the first pregnancy about around termination potentially.
Right.
And so, and with that first pregnancy, you guys were, maybe you were still talking about it, considering it, but what to do. But at week 20,
Hmm.
um, the decision was made for you, right?
Yes.
So curious what the, was the prognosis any different given I guess it was 5 years later, right? So it was around 2015.
Yes.
Daughter was born. So was the conversation, given that again you'd been through it before, you'd been through, was the conversation any different between yourselves and the doctors, or between you and your husband? Did your feelings change at all about anything?
Yeah, that's a great question. No one's ever asked me that before. And I love that because I think to split that up between my husband and myself, I think it was very different. Um, I think the first time around, we probably would have gone through with the termination if things hadn't happened spontaneously. But we
Mm.
also were only going off of what doctors said. And honestly, if that my first child, her name was Sophia, if she had
You
lived,
know what I was going to ask, but I
uh,
didn't want to. I didn't want to. I didn't want to ask. Put you in an uncomfortable spot. So.
yeah, no, her name is Sophia. And if I think if she had been born, I don't know what the cutoff was at the time to try to save them, like 23 weeks, maybe. I don't know. There's usually a cutoff to get into the NICU. If they would have tried, I think she would have survived. But we had no idea. They told us it was incompatible with life. It's not viable. Um, but by the time I got to my fourth pregnancy, I felt like it was different.
Mm.
And I felt like, okay, I'm gonna really try. And it seemed different. It was going better. We actually didn't see a lot of the fetal abnormalities until a little bit later in the pregnancy. So at first, like, I mean, so part of it, because of the low muscle tone that she has, instead of moving around a lot, the babies with her condition are very still. And
Mm.
she was moving. And so that was huge. Like the first baby didn't move very much. So I kept thinking, this is different. This is
Yeah.
going to be different. And the doctors, though, were always pretty pessimistic, to be honest, which was very frustrating. But I also understand they're doing their job to the best of their ability. But we were told one time that she would probably like, so we had a lot of high risk appointments every week. I had to go see the high risk doctors, and he said she has probably two holes in her heart and she's not going to survive. So we went to a fetal, did a fetal echocardiogram with a cardiologist, and he's like, there are no holes in her heart. Her heart looks beautiful. So we're constantly jostled around, right? It was kind of this nightmare, and I kind of just hung on to this belief that I've done this three times before. This one feels different.
Yeah. It's a it's such a tricky spot, right? Doctors are dealing with their experiences,
Hmm.
maybe in the tens, hundreds, thousands. You don't know, right?
Yeah.
Given the condition, given their experience,
Hmm.
I believe they're doing the best that they know how.
Hmm.
You are a one.
Yeah.
Your experience and your intuition.
Yeah.
It's tough because parents never, on the one hand, they don't talk about the times that doctors got it right.
Yeah.
Mostly the times where they got it wrong, or they're, again, to your point, it's like they're looking at what they're looking at. One doctor somehow sees two holes and not going to survive, and the other one, everything's great.
Yeah.
I don't think one of them was like looking for something and the other one wasn't. But
Right.
and we know what, as humans, we know which one we're going to gravitate toward.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, door number two, heart looks great. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
um, and it sounded like that was also in alignment with your intuition.
Yeah.
So, a lot of parents will share, um, honoring, if they, could, if they did it again, they would honor that intuition, whether right or wrong. Uh,
Hmm.
but just to trust it and see, it's gonna go how it's gonna go, but just to keep
Right.
keep trusting that maybe there's something beyond this science knowing, and this looking at images and looking at statistics. And
Yeah.
I remind parents, there'll be these percentage, your baby was born at 25 weeks, therefore they have a 30% chance of dot dot dot, and it's like, but your baby is not 30%. It's just either ends up with this condition or doesn't have this condition.
Right. Yeah.
So things were feeling better. You were feeling optimistic. Were there any challenges between sort of the confirmation of having the same condition and delivery at 32 weeks?
Um, yes. I mean, so there were so I developed, well, one of them I was born with that I didn't realize until I was pregnant the first time. So I have a septation in my uterus, which kind of almost divides it in half, but not quite. Which the doctors were always worried about if that was causing problems with all the preterm labor, which some again said definitely, and some said, well, probably not. Um, so that was always being looked at. I was being monitored for preterm labor weekly. Actually, 2 days before she was born, they checked me and they said, "Oh, you're fine." And then 2 days later, she came. I also, and I think at this point, but by the time it was a little bit later on, it was not a problem. But for I would say at least three of the pregnancies, I had something called subchorionic hematomas, where I was creating blood clots inside the uterus, and that's actually what made my first child spontaneously go into labor. Is it caused a placental abruption? It got caught behind and it abrupted, which kind of turned out, I think, maybe for the best case scenario at that time, but it was dangerous, like wherever they came off, and it could injure the baby and the placenta. And so that was always being monitored. So I had these other things going on. Plus, there was her stuff with, they started seeing club feet and they started seeing, reduced movement, and they were measuring her head size and chin size. So all these things were kind of being monitored extremely closely. Um, yeah.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, I knew early on, when I started Graham's Foundation, I said, I do not want to get into the challenge of trying to like solve for premature birth. I'm like, every parent that I talk to, I mean, the reasons of it for it are just
Yeah.
so much of it is just the randomness of perhaps those two people trying to have a child, and then the biology and how we're designed, and
Yeah.
some people seem like they're designed and having babies is easy peasy, and other women it's just not. And I do I guess probably my sort of some of my spiritual practices come into play where you know, are we kind of perfectly designed, even though some of it may seem imperfect?
Hmm.
But we humans, boy, we are going to try and fix every, all,
Yeah.
we want to try and solve for all these
Yeah.
conditions. And we're like at 8.5 billion people. It's like the, have your husband try and do the math on that. It's like,
Yeah.
like the possibilities
Yeah.
and the reasons why. Uh,
Yeah.
it's got to be infinite. It's got to be infinite, and trying to solve for the infinite. So that's the challenge and the miracle of birth. It's sort of like, and I think getting back to like the when you were sharing about the blogging, that what's interesting is if you were you took any party and you had some parents in there and you started saying, let's talk about all the things that have happened with your pregnancies, like
Hmm.
the stories and the miscarriages and the Sophias that nobody knows about. Like it's it's everywhere.
Yeah.
There's a tremendous amount of trauma that a lot of parents, and it's not, I don't think it's not necessarily hiding it,
Hmm.
just not, it's like you don't have a baby there to talk about it.
Right.
Like, you're sharing about your daughter that still is 10 now,
Hmm.
has physical therapy, has um, some with her genetic condition. There are probably some visible signs.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it can become it's probably something that ends up being talked about or a
Hmm.
conversation. But without that, people don't know. People aren't aware. So maybe maybe that's a good time to talk a little bit, transition and talk about your book.
Yeah.
Um, the reason why, you know, you decided to write it, sort of what your hopes are with the book.
Hmm.
You shared you started blogging now, what, 10, 12, 14 years ago. Your daughter's 10.
Yeah.
So had some time for perspective. So I'm kind of curious what compelled you at this point in time to write the book?
Yeah. So, like I said before, even after the blogging, I started writing a lot of articles and pieces for online outlets because I think I really tapped into, maybe it was healing for me to connect with others. Everyone always asks me, is writing it like catharsis? Is it like therapy? I actually go to therapy. I've gone to therapy after the first loss and then, with Evelyn and no, it's not therapy. For me, it's not therapy, but it does help. I think for one, it helps me remember stuff, all the details that I don't want to forget because our memories are faulty, right? Over years, you forget things. It also helps me, I think, put my life into perspective a little bit. Like we can sit and think, oh gosh, why does this happen to me? Why did I lose three babies? Why does my daughter have to have this genetic condition? Like I wish I could take it away. Um, but then when I write it all, I'm like, no, I think I see purpose here. This is where I'm supposed to be. Kind of to your point of like, we can't fix everything. So what do we do with what we have? Um, so that's kind of why I kept writing about it. And I think it was giving people a chance to talk about their stories.
Mm,
Again, to your point of when there's no child there, or if you've lost a baby, or you don't feel comfortable sharing, but you want to, but it makes other people uncomfortable. So we hold it in. I open that up. People can talk like, here's my story. What's your story? And
yeah,
I love that. So when my husband and I moved to Oxford for him to take the job at Miami, I had to quit my psychology job. That's when I was like, I think I'm just going to go into writing and English stuff full time. So, and I was coming up, my daughter was about 4 at the time. So I thought, well, I've written a lot about Sophia and the early losses. What if I wrote her story? Because that was the whole NICU thing. I mean, we were not seeing that coming either. That was a surprise. I had no idea what a NICU was. That was a learning experience. So I'm like, I think I have a book now. And I think I can tell this whole story. And I'm going to devote most of it to my daughter, who we went through so much with, and she's still going through a lot. But so we came out of it, but not how we wanted, but in a really good place. So that's why I started writing it. I went back to school to get a master's in fine arts and creative writing. And it ended up being the bulk of it was my thesis project. And then after I graduated, I beefed it up a little bit more and I edited it more and I found a publisher and I'm like thrilled that people get to read it because that's what I love about writing, especially memoir, is it opens that conversation. It's like, well, I told my story, now I want to listen, and I love that.
yeah. And so, what's been the early experience or early feedback or
Mhm.
I know it just came out in March, and
Yeah,
so it's
yeah,
fairly, it's still new and still fresh.
it
Just kind of
is.
curious how you're feeling and if there's I guess I want to make sure if there is some we don't want to talk about the book. We want people to purchase the book and read the book. But if
Right.
if there's there are any sort of highlights, or again, for our audience that are, parents of premature babies, if
Mhm.
there are any points that you might want to highlight or, um, yeah.
Yeah. The response to the book has been wonderful. I mean, obviously, there's people who have read it who I don't know. I'll never know what they think, and that's fine. But I've heard from people I know, family and friends and coworkers, people my husband works with have read it. And then there's been some reviews on Amazon from people I don't know. I got a reviewer from an outlet that just picked it up and did a review for me and gave it 5 stars. And the way she described it though, like for having someone who doesn't know me at all and to pick up my book and to get it and to see what I was trying to do with it was amazing to me. I'm like, yes, it worked. Like, because it's called Mosaic for a reason. It's a little bit untraditional in formatting. It's not written like a linear story from, my first baby to the last. It's interspersed a little bit. Some of the essays are very brief. Some are formatted in different ways to get some of the meaning across, like doctor's notes or message boards, because I would Google everything, right? Like when you hear new terms from doctors, you're looking it up on Google and WebMD. And so I tried to make it like an experience. Like if what was it like to be me during these years? Um, and I also included other things in there that I think so you don't have to be someone who's gone through loss or had a premature baby, I think, to understand that the basic themes are grief, resilience, finding hope. So and things like even dealing with mental health. I talk a lot about my anxiety disorder, how I've dealt with it, and that's interspersed throughout. I talk a lot about my relationship with my own mother and how that kind of informed the choices I ended up making, and how she and I started kind of in the beginning, like we've always gotten along, but we're very similar. When people are similar, sometimes it's hard to see eye to eye on everything. And I think, over the years, I've really come to understand, and like we've created a pretty great relationship. And to see her be a grandma to my daughter is pretty amazing. So I kind of cover all those things. Which I think people are getting it. I was a little worried because
Yeah.
it's like a word mosaic. It's all these things coming together to say, okay, at the end of this time, and the book ends, or I guess around, she was maybe about 4 years old. So about 2019, 2020 is like where the book ends. This is my life. It's imperfect, but it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to know more. I'd be curious, given your background with clinical psychology,
Yeah.
writing, um, going through the pregnancy experiences that you went through,
Hmm.
um, the 5 weeks in the neonatal intensive care unit that you weren't expecting. Um, I guess, are there any words you might have, excuse me, for other parents in the sense that, like you shared here about um, you're prone to anxiety, and
Hmm.
oftentimes um, a traumatic event can really heighten. Seems like it can
Yes.
heighten whatever, or it could cause something that was under the covers to really come out.
Sure.
And I know that sort of happened in our experience.
Mm-hmm.
And in many respects, we kind of never recovered from a lot of that trauma, and uh, didn't didn't really deal with it. We just sort of got on to caring for our daughter.
Yeah.
That in a lot of respects can hide
Hmm.
um, sort of the underlying grief,
Hmm.
sadness. So I just wonder if you
Yeah.
might share any thoughts, get from your own experience,
Yeah.
and what you, if you felt like these were things that I I did that cared for me, and maybe some things where if you had to do it again, you might do it a little differently.
Yeah. So I think you're absolutely right. I mean, my experience and what a lot of parents who've gone through anything with pregnancy that's not going right, I mean, I think should probably realistically create anxiety to some level. Um, but yeah, if you already struggle with anxiety or depression or any other sort of mood disorder or something, it makes it, I think that can make it even harder. So I think I knew I had anxiety. When I was a kid, I didn't know. I just knew I was the way I was. I think I realized it, I say in my book, when I went to school, my grad school for clinical psychology, I read about generalized anxiety disorder. I'm like, wait, that's me. I was like reading it. I'm like, this sounds just like me. You worry about everything all the time. You're worst case scenario kind of person. So I kind of identified it early, but didn't do much about it. I just kind of white knuckled my way through stuff until all of this started happening. And I think, especially by the fourth pregnancy, by the time that one doctor said she's probably not going to live, we went to see the cardiologist. He's like, no, she's fine. I was like, at that point, I'm like, that's enough. So I stopped going to the high risk appointments. I'm like, it's going to be what it's going to be. This is not good for my mental health. And I knew it was, probably against medical advice. I still kept my normal OBGYN appointments. So I cannot be told every week something's wrong when there's nothing we can do. that will deal with it when it happens. So that was the first thing I think I did for myself. It was like, I'm not gonna, and not such a rule follower. Like, I'll do everything they say and do every appointment. I did every test. And I was like, I can't. I had my mother-in-law coming with me to appointments. I couldn't go anymore. I was so fearful of what was
Yeah.
going to happen. And then after my daughter was born, of course, there was all, I mean, that was, we didn't know what was happening and we dealt, so we kind of, like you said, you get through it for the kid, for the baby, you're there, you do what you got to do. So I think it was maybe a couple years after that. And I have this in my book too, where I'm driving her to daycare and I'm just crying. And I'm like, we're in a new town. I felt very anxious again, overwhelmed. I have this baby that needs all these services. I said, now's the time I'm going to help myself. So that's when I started going to therapy for my anxiety. I got a medication for my anxiety. I found the right one that worked. I'm like, because I need to do this for her. Now she needs me. This is where we are. So it was actually really a turning point for me. It was kind of the impetus for me to start taking care of my own self,
Mhm.
which was great because I didn't want her to feel that from me. Like she needed the best version of me. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
So important that what you just shared. And Graham's Foundation, we're totally focused on supporting the parents.
Hmm.
Like, is the baby important? Absolutely. But,
Yeah.
there's doctors for that, there's nurses, there's specialists. But there really isn't anything for the parents. And I understand because there's nothing that the NICU can't, they have no code to charge for caring for the parents because
Right. Right.
you're not the patient
Yeah.
technically. But if you're not well, if you're not strong, if you don't feel confident, I mean, within weeks or months, you're taking your baby home, and the world assumes that all's well and you got this.
Right.
Um, and there can be, real different levels of still things to manage,
Hmm.
um, and to sort out and to figure out. And
Yeah.
again, if you're trying to do that and you're, completely over anxious about everything, like the ability to worry there, that's a deep well of
Yes.
worry, right? I
Yes.
think for a lot of parents, the challenge with prematurity, specifically, I know your daughter has a particular condition that at least says, okay, this is what
Right.
we're dealing with this.
Hmm.
With prematurity, especially when it's more extreme,
Hmm.
like in our situation, it's like the possibilities are endless because so much of the baby didn't develop um, in the womb, and so
Hmm.
the ability, again, a deep well of worry, or if
Right.
worry,
Right.
if that's sort if that's your tendency, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so I think it's really, I think what you've pointed to is it's really important to understand what do you need, right?
Yeah.
So we have mentors. We have a mobile app where you can track the baby's development. We've got the care package with information. It's like we're trying to we Graham's is not trying to solve for parent support. We're trying to recognize that we as humans need, some of us need to write, some of us need to um, exercise, some of us need to be give me stuff to track. I mean, there's like different things that we need to sort of work our breathe. You know,
Yeah.
all could probably meditate more, but just to be able to take, to your point, to be able to take care of ourselves, and it's not easy to ask because your baby is going through so much.
Yeah.
Feel very selfish to try and seek out support for yourself at the same time, but it's
Yeah.
so critically important.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, in the NICU, I felt there were some, parent support groups and things. There was a photography group that I actually am donating. My publishers donate, I think, for the rest of the year, every month, some money toward called Capturing Hopes. And they send professional photographers in and we'll do free photo sessions. And we did that a couple times. But otherwise, it's really just meeting the other parents and kind of commiserating together, and you figure it out together. And that was about it.
A lot of parents struggle with that piece because it's hard not to compare how you're doing versus other.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which is why with our mentors, they've all been out of the NICU at least a year. It's all virtual.
Yeah.
They're not at the same hospital, so you don't have to worry about like, oh, doctors, oh, you got this doctor. Oh, yeah, isn't he?
Right.
Whatever.
Yeah.
All that
Yeah.
kind of stuff, that you worry about. So,
Yeah, for sure.
is there anything before we wrap up? Like, are there any questions that I didn't ask that would have given you the chance to maybe answer or share something that you didn't get a chance to share so far?
I don't I don't think so. I feel like I've shared a lot about our story and my book, why I write.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I love what you all do because, like I said, I support anything that supports the parents, and the babies. But you're right, the parents need support, especially when I don't know if most of us probably go into the NICU not expecting it or not really, even if you're expecting it, there's no way to prepare for that, right? Like it's such a steep learning curve and it's scary at times and it's hard.
Most of us, as I say, most of us are first time customers,
Yeah.
and it wasn't something that we were looking for.
No.
And it's not like hospitals, come in when you're 20 weeks pregnant so we can give you a tour of the NICU just in case
Right.
something goes
Right.
horribly wrong. And, you need to spend months here. No,
Yeah.
it's not how that goes. So,
Yeah.
Laura, I just want to thank you for spending the time with us, sharing
Mm.
your story, and really all the best with your book. I look forward to being able to share this with our community as well.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.